Thank you so much for coming. There's just going to be about a 5-minute delay before this poetry reading starts. Give me a thumbs up if you're okay with that. We'll be right back. Well, sorry for the delay, and thank you so much for coming. If you've been to a Verse Like Water event before, you know I'm Jeff Johnson. I teach English here, and I direct this series. And you know that I always have a brilliant introduction, but we have to have just a few business notes first. And again, thank you for coming. Quiet your phones down if you haven't done that already. And thank you for doing that. Kwame's going to read for about 45 minutes, and then we'll have a kind of a different kind of book signing. The virus has gotten a little bit more angry in Minnesota, so if you'd like a book from him, go ahead and buy it, put your name on a slip of paper. He'll sign them up here after the reading, and we'll make sure you get reunited with your book. We'll have a craft talk at 1:15, and this time out, this poetry reading, this Verse Like Water literary event is being sponsored by the Minnesota Legacy Fund, Five Wings Arts Council, and Minnesota Public Radio. We gather this afternoon in a flourishing way to greet Kwame Dawes, who has graciously agreed to help Verse Like Water celebrate its 10th year of offering first-rate literary events for the Brainerd Lakes region. In joyful anticipation of this reading, I've been thinking of a question I always ask my students on the first day of all the different English classes I teach here, and it's simple. Are there any poetry fans in this classroom? If I'm lucky, one or two hands flutter into the air, and possibly what I think of as the wavering hand of uncertainty. Gently and immediately, I ask if there might be any fans of music, and of course, all hands rise. Lesson 1 is that the two questions are exactly the same, and few poets understand the endless points of intersection between music and language like Kwame does. In all countries, across all centuries, poetry always precedes prose because we sing before we speak. And how happy I am to be hosting a poet who will demonstrate the magical back and forthness between the two with such grace and eloquence. I want to report, too, that just before the world changed, I had the chance to hear the music of Nigerian poet and novelist Chris Abani as he read at the College of St. Benedict. For the Q&A, I rushed the mic stand like a poetry fan. One of the poems he read that evening was devoted to Kwame, and I asked Chris if he could speak for a while about the friendship between them, and perhaps other friendships he feels towards the fine poets of the world. A great light filled him. Because he talked so long about this, there was no time for any other questions, and when he came off the stage, I was enveloped in a hug I bet Kwame knows well. I give thanks to all the poets who have read for our college and community in these years, and for the shelves of books they've dreamed for us so we can all take them up in all our favorite chairs. Kwame Dawes is a master of imagery, of images we can carry long after the books have been set down. In Nebraska, I see Kwame, or a man who looks suspiciously like Kwame, holding something they never need in Ghana, the place of his birth, and that's a snow shovel. I see him beneath a prairie sky and cloud formations you would never see in the Jamaica of his youth. As a kind of prelude to the gorgeous poems to follow in this book, I see a stanza floating, unnamed, whose subject and mood can't be an accident on this cold and windy day. And I gotta find it. The air now changes with the light and soft winds across the prairie. It is November, the season of leaves, the light sussing, sensual as bright autumnal rain scattered over the last greens. I know Kwame has forgiven me for bringing him not rain, but snow. And I also know it's time to offer a warm Minnesota welcome to Kwame Dawes.
So it's good to see you all here. I'm coming from Nebraska, so, well, you know, I named the book Nebraska, so there must be a connection. Because nobody just names a book Nebraska if they don't have some kind of relationship to the place. But it's been good to get up here for this event. And Jeff, thank you for having me. I'm going to apologize in advance. I have incredibly bad eyesight because I've had transplants and things like that. So I'm a bit of a cyborg in that way, but cyborg stuff doesn't always work out brilliantly. Sometimes you just barely survive. So I typically read from an iPad, which used to be cool, doing so because nobody else was doing that. But now my iPad is out of juice, so you're gonna have to watch me do this most of the time, okay? And I want to read from Nebraska. I will say a few things about how this book came about, because this is, if one knows anything about me and my work, I generate a lot of work, as a poet, and I've published quite a number of books. And the reason is that I write a lot. And I write because I find that as a poet, as a writer, I understand myself through the making of poems. As I come to poetry, not to tell somebody something, for the most part, but to understand what I'm thinking and feeling. And so there's a sense in which language and the language of poetry allows me to express, understand, to discover thoughts, feelings, and memories and ideas that are running through my existence. And so I come to poetry as a shelter, as a place that is welcoming for me. And even though I write about difficult subjects, the process of making poems is a path towards, if not resolving them, but at least confronting them and having some kind of a feeling, even if it's delusional, of control over experience. But then there's beauty and there's delight, and poetry in its best of articulations gives a nod to those qualities and those values. It reminds me of the blues. It's sort of an understanding of the blues, that much reading and thinking about it and listening to blues artists talk about it. The curious thing about the blues is that we think blues is sad music, but you never see people crying in a blues joint while the song is playing. They're not weeping, they're not mourning, they're not screaming and bawling, they're having a good time. So what is that contradiction? And it comes from an idea that Bob Marley would take up in a phrase. He says, one good thing about music, when it hits, you feel no pain. So hit me with music, brutalize me with music. Isn't that a great construction? Hit me with music, brutalize me with music. And the point is that it will hit, but with music, you feel no pain. And I like to think that poetry does that. It's that wonderful relationship between me. I'm prolonging this because I can't read. I wish I knew my poems by heart. I envy those people. I find them very annoying, by the way. Those poets who go around knowing their poems by heart. It's very annoying. They're show-offs, if you ask me. Who does that? Like, remember your poems. Like, okay. Anyway, I'll begin with a poem called How I Became an Apostle. It's after Edward Hirsch. Now that I have my thorn in the flesh, I can write epistles, holy writs. It's winter. I limp out just after the delicate chaos of flurries covers the driveway, and I shovel. This is a ritual of sin. After clearing a long path, behind me the pox of snow returns. The angel, remember, stopped fighting when I broke his hip, tore his ligament, as we say. Now mine throbs deep inside muscle, bone, and fat, and in this cold, the pain purifies me. By dusk, I can barely walk. My foot drags across the frozen driveway as the snow falls heavily. My first epistle to the saints is a prayer pleading that this too will pass. The snow covers multitudes. Our body's working out just fine, you know, so far. A poem called Advent. Christmas falls on a Friday. The long week of labor and waiting is gray with dull light, and gradually the gloom fills my bones. I've declared myself a fat man once too often. Here in Nebraska, I have learned the art of restraint, hoarding lamentations and complaints, how to hold my tongue until it is clear that those around me have unlearned the rituals of compassion. They cannot see the despair in my eyes. Remember when we knew that simply speaking out, our bile would release it from our bodies? That leaching chemistry of confession or hoping? Not here. Here, the body creates a membrane of such leathery resilience that it may keep in all the wounds we have collected. And here, in the slow march to Christmas, I grow bloated with decency, and I have decided to grow my beard again, the uniform of a man pioneering the wilderness. At church, the choir did not sing a Christmas song. It is as if someone forgot the season. But the pastors and elders all wore suits and ties while we clapped our hands to the radio songs. Good, clean Jesus of Chick-fil-A and Texas charm. Look at my eyes. Pay attention. Clouds, slow moving across the prairie sky. So slow, it is as if nothing is moving across the bigness of things. I was explaining that these poems are coming out of the concept of the shelter, the poem space, the making of poems as a shelter. And I've been very aware of it moving from South Carolina to Nebraska, of learning a new culture, learning a new landscape, and learning a new space, and having to understand it through this process of writing, how to understand people. So at some point, a few years ago, my university was thinking of doing something to celebrate some of the work that I'd been doing. And one of the ideas was to have a big event. This was just before COVID, so we were getting things together. And I thought it'd be a good idea to just do these little giveaways for people who came to the event. Maybe a little chapbook of some poems, because I figured in the back of my head that I'd written a few poems that were Nebraska related. So then I went to my, stash of poems, all the poems that I've written, the different things, and started to look through them, and I discovered that I had a lot of poems written about Nebraska. And so when I pulled these together into what was starting to be this collection, then we realized that this was a book. The University of Nebraska Press was happy to publish it at pretty quickly for the event. The event never happened, but we did the book. COVID, how that works. So we did the book, and this is the book that came through. And then organizing it and thinking about it, I realized that I've been so occupied by it. And this is true about my experience. I'm writing, but I'm not necessarily thinking about themes and ideas. I'm thinking about my life. One of the rituals of my life is to walk. It began just as I walk, and then, of course, we got a dog. We got a dog from my father-in-law, who we thought was going to eventually leave Jamaica and come and stay with us in Nebraska. He came and said, hell no. Well, he wouldn't say hell no, but he certainly did hell no, and went right back to Jamaica. He says, I'm all right, I'm good. So we were stuck with Bella, a cockapoo. So I want you to picture this, a tiny little cockapoo and this big grown-ass black man walking through a white neighborhood every day. That's my life. And I'm grateful for Bella, because Bella is my protection. Because I can't be going to hit somebody with a cockapoo. The worst I could be doing is stealing the cockapoo, but she likes me, so it couldn't be that. So that's the picture. But one of the great things about walking in Lincoln is the seasonal changes that you see, and the geese. The geese make their journey across. So this is a poem that references that moment. It's called "The Barking Geese of Eddington." Eddington is the little area that we live in. At 4 o'clock, the heavy swoop of night is coming. We walk, man and dog, though our pedigrees suggest nothing of the archetypal companionship. We would be strained companions in the wilderness. Company, yes, but death would mean only the loss of habit. Though at the top of the street, the geese begin their barking through the air. It is winter, and there they are, as if their migration was delayed. They fill the sky with the sharp angles of triangular formation, and in this instant, we stop, look upward, trying to follow the pattern of their flight. This we share. Upstairs in my home, our guest, the celebrated novelist, weeps at night. Between his genius is the darkness of loss. He has lost a lover. She will not answer him, and he is making bargains with God. He grows thin, can't sleep. We meet in the plush light of our dining room and talk of the barking geese, the snow on the ground, the calculation of fame. This is the tail end of a year. All the world is waiting for some calamity, some bomb to explode. Sure, we will die, each of us. This is the truth. I study our faces like one studies the dead. Another poem on thinking about death is called "The Immigrant Contemplates Death." The man who carries his yoga mat rolled up under his arm, walking through his city, is the man I have longed to be. It is as if he will live forever. This is what I can say of exile. A body like me has lost track of the narrative of mortality. It is the brittle, dry air of these prairies, the wide open fields, the soil that has grown too hard for burial. It is easy to mistake the longevity of farm people of white Lutheran stock for kindred souls. I was born in a city that turned into a village within hearing distance, and the deep red soil of Accra knows it is always prepared for the deep warmth of cankering bodies. For the spirits that treat the trees and roads as temporary dwellings before the teeming underneath of performance. In Kingston, I consider death each day, its friendship with the living, and we die as if the body was made for this. It is true that among these Midwestern people, I can forget myself. I can forget that the deep funk in my skin is my brokenness steaming in these late days of my life. Even my doctor thinks I will live longer, but I know that the back end of this year, when Lincoln's earth grows stony with hoarfrost, I will land in St. Mary, walk out into the morning barefooted, unshirted, and stand in the soft, dark soil with my weight pressing me into its familiar give and embrace. And this warm circling of air is the comfort of all saints, to gain and gain and gain. The last line is a reference to that Paul's statement, for me to live is Christ and to die is gain and gain and gain. And the references are to the cities and places that are important to me. Accra, where I was born in Ghana in West Africa. Kingston, where I grew up. And then finally St. Mary in Jamaica, which is a really lush and green parish where I used to escape when I was in my early 20s. I used to just disappear. Nobody would know where I was, and I would just go into that area of Jamaica. And there was a family that would take me in, and I would just stay there for days. So those are the shelters for me. I think the poet Ilya Kaminsky, a wonderful poet, I think one of the poets that I always await his next book. I find him a tremendous poet. Belarusian, he's Russian, and has lived here in America for many years. But his book, he has a hearing impairment, and he's written these poems about the way to see the world through how one hears and what one doesn't hear. And I've been fascinated by his most recent work on that subject. And so the phrase, the hall of the deaf, this is a reference to Ilya's work, longing for the hall of the deaf. At the end of it, there is this thing, words. We collect them as people moving through crowds collect germs, their bodies speaking to each other, the scent, the leaping insects, the flow of blood. An old woman remains you that the menstrual regime reminds you that the menstrual regimes of women whisper their monthly rendezvous. The scientists have not done this, but I have, and I have calculated that 12 feet of the distance for eyes to make contact, or for the sweat emanating from a woman's thighs for this to happen, and women who live countries away, if they talk each day, somehow the cadence of their voices finds a strange chemical echo. And this too is magic, but is science. And these are the miracles we know. What of those we don't? It was her way of saying her death is not cause for mourning, though she said she would hate for the ritual of black, the commitment to memory in the act of black for a year to be ignored. Death is ordinary except where it is caused by the calculation of vengeance and willful neglect. Then it is extraordinary. These lines across the page are not songs. Such music belongs to the magician. No, these are mere conjurings. They are spells, in the way that remembering can be an incantation for light. Outside, the temperature has dropped to -2, and everything is static in the air. Such a dry prairie cruelty, the cold that has killed and will kill again. What we make of the silences of the epoch is what we make of art. This is my dream, that my words may be a grand infection, turning and turning in a bare studio, our bodies electrified to passions each time we walk across a ribbon of imagination, a kind of holy beauty consuming body. The good news is that I know I have about 10% left on my iPad. So the last part of this reading will be amazing. I promise you that, because I won't be like, I'm reading like a really old guy, but I'm actually quite animated when I read normally. I just got to find the words. It's just the thing. So don't worry. The last few minutes are just they're gonna blow you away. You're gonna leave here singing and dancing. It'll be like Hallelujah Church. It's coming. Hang in there. I'm just making you want it. Really, really want it badly. I want to read a poem for my daughter. I have three. What do you call them when they're grown? Children? What do you call them? Like kids? They're not kids. They're grown. They're people. Like they're grown. So I have offspring. I have 3 offspring, and they're grown, like responsible adults. They got jobs and stuff like that. But they have some bad habits, from their youth, and one of them is to check all my books. They don't read my poetry. They're not that interested in it. They don't care about it, except to find out whether I've written about them. So that's their only interest. And for them, it's like a game, like not a game. It's like more like a sport. So what they'll do is they'll go through it and 2 poems about me. What's wrong with this man? And so they're counting how many poems I've written about them. And they think I don't know this is what is going on, but I do. So I like to mess with them. So for this book, I only put 1 poem for my youngest, Senna, Ekwa. Ekwa is the lawyer, and largely because she was taking too much interest in this issue, and she was starting to do law. So I figured I don't want to mess with her, because she could do things like declare me like of non-sound mind and then take over my this is what lawyers do as far as I know. So I wrote this poem for her, and she's not stopped gloating, and so my other 2 are just not happy with me right now. So Christmas is not going to be fun. All right, so this is my poem for Ekwa. It's called Purple. She has mixed feelings about the poem. She's happy that she got a mention, really not happy with the poem itself. But what do I care? Like, seriously. I meant it well. So, Purple for Ekwa. Walking, I drew my hand over the lumpy bloom of a spray of purple. I stripped away my fingers stained purple, put it to my nose. The minty honey, a perfume so aggressively pleasant, I gave it to you to smell. My daughter, and you pulled away as if I was giving you a palm full of wasps, deceptions. Smell the way the air changes because of purple and green, I say. This is the promise I make to you. I will never give you a fist full of wasps, just the surprise of purple and the scent of rain. Now, why did she not like the poem? Because she thought I was making it up, that she freaked out when I put my hand in front of her face. But she did freak out. She behaved as if I was about to hit her, and I've never, so I was very offended by that. I'll do 2 poems from memory, just to show off, because I can too, and then I'll read some of the stuff that is just going to make you leave here dancing from the iPad. It's a poem called Fat Man, Little Boy. You may recognize the reference, Fat Man and Little Boy, so it's related to to the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs, but it's a lot more. And this was written just around the time of the first Gulf War. What are these so withered and wild in their attire? Streetcar catch a fire, passengers glowing like coal. And who are these come wailing this way like zombies, arms stretched out, skin melting from their bones? These are my enemies with worms in their eyes. These are my enemies with worms in their eyes. Don't you know that I am fat man? And you could be my little boy. Since August 1945, I've ruled the sky, turned day into night. See me, big fat man, I want you to be my little boy. Count not the casualties of war, count the fronts that are gained. Women and children are soldier factories, eliminate them. I am become death, the slaughterer of worlds. Hawk-eyed and swift, I swoop down and plunder. Obey me, play rock and roll, or you will be my enemy with worms in your eyes. You will be my enemies with worms in your eyes. Don't you know that I am fat man? You could be my little boy. Hiroshima, Nagasaki, Chernobyl, Baghdad. I've ruled the sky, turned day into night. See me, big, fat man. I want you to be my little boy. We could rule the nations hand in hand. We could rule the nations together hand in hand. Don't you know that I am fat man? I want you to be my little boy. So that's one. I think I got all of that right. The other piece I will do is a piece that makes me think a little bit about faith and writing. Faith issues of belief and spirituality permeate my work because they permeate my life. I think, and so one of the interesting questions that I've wrestled with is the intersection of the history of, say, Christianity as an ally to the history of colonialism and slavery, all these things that are in my sort of heritage and legacy are despicable things. There seems to be this weird contradiction, and in a sense, that contradiction was an existential challenge for me, and continues to be an interesting and existential challenge. So this is a piece called, it's called Burning. I still see the puis blossom, the stagnant pools, the mosquitoes, the screaming schools, the gully bottoms filled with echoes. Stray dog smokes on rubber, burnt offering, ghetto pyre. I met her 7 miles to the harbor. The black Starliner was gone. I couldn't find Marcus. I've gone blank. Don't worry, it's not panicky for me because, you know, after all, who knows their poems by heart? Ottoman Kwama hovers above. The pattern is the same. I haven't lost my faith. I'm still feeling a little bit of pain from looking for stray love among the blind leaves. Stray dog floats, stray dog burns on rubber, burnt offering, holy fire. I'll stop there. Okay, so now I will end this reading with my iPad. I really appreciated, by the way, the music that was playing earlier, Bob Marley's music that was playing earlier, and I'm grateful for it because my work grows out of that music, of reggae music. It's shaped by reggae music, and it's, you know, reggae music has been one of the framing realities of my life. So here's a couple. I'm going to read a few poems that come out of this. This is a poem that I wrote when I was doing some work for the BBC several years ago, which involved my going to Ethiopia to do a piece on Haile Selassie, the Emperor of Ethiopia, who had spent time in Bath, England during the exile during the Second World War. Ethiopia has the unique history of being the one African nation that was able to resist the forces of colonialism. In this case, it was the Italians, and they were never colonized. One of the things that Haile Selassie did, though, was he became very interested. He was the emperor of Ethiopia, and he became very interested in the Africans of the diaspora, black people around the world. And so he gave us area of land, several acres, several hundred acres, hectares of land for African people of African descent, mainly from the United States and then from the rest of the Caribbean, to return to Africa and to go to Ethiopia and live in a place called Sheshemani. While I was there, I visited Sheshemani and I met a man who came in the late 60s to Ethiopia from Jamaica. And this was my encounter with him. He was a Rastafarian, African postman for Solomon Ephraim Wolf. 7%. This is gonna work. Son, who is that? Is the African postman daddy? Burning Spear. East from Addis Ababa, and then south deep into the Rift Valley, I can hear the horns trumpeting over the flat-roofed acacia trees, see the African women bend low with wood heavy on their backs, and the cows, goats, and donkeys, mules, sheep, and horses, snapped into obedient herds by sprinting children, move along the roadside. Life happens here. I am traveling to the land I have heard about, Sheshemani, the green place, 500 acres of jazz benevolence, and I know now that I long to hear the roots man tell me how, despite rumors of his passing, the Natty keep on riding, keeps on standing in the fields of praise to hold on to the faith of roots people. Brother Solomon, you put the name Ephraim on your head and carry the face of the true Rasta, the face of an Ashanti warrior, eyes deep under heavy lids, and your skin tight as leather, blacker than black. I've met you before on the streets of Kingston there, where you trod to the hiss and slander of the heathen. You, Natty Dread, gathering the people's broken minds into your calabash. You carry it all. Tell them, return to the roots. The healing shall take place. You are Burning Spear's voice in the field of Teph. You tell me of the prophecy of Marcus, and I listen to you through the phlegm, through the gruff of your voice. And suddenly when I ask about the passing of the emperor, you rise up like a staff of correction, your voice reaching back to the mountains, your warrior self, your yardman greatness, and you speak a mystery of those who have ears but won't hear, and those who have eyes and won't see. And I know that this dread will one day stand in this soil and find his feet growing roots, that soon the earth will be darker for the arrival of Solomon. Oh, let the heathen rage, let the doubters scoff, let this Ghanaian youth whose eyes have seen the face of Jesus Christ, let him too sit and marvel at the faith of the Natty. For this African postman has forsaken father and mother and has come to stand before his imperial majesty to call only him father, and so that the father might call him son. And the world will carry on its weary march, and the ibises will swoop in the Ethiopian dusk, and the smoke will rise from wood fires, and the night will come with news that the rootsman, after 400 years of being told he's homeless, has come home. Yes, Jah has come home. Sons and daughters of his imperial majesty, Haile Selassie, earth rightful ruler, without any apology say, this is the time when I and I and I and I and I will come home. Yes, Jah, oh come a holy fool. Na le go, na le go, na le go. That's a poem for Burning Spear, the great, great Jamaican singer. 2 more poems. This is a poem called Rituals Before the Poem. Write my name, write my name, write my name, write my name. You feet touch my finger on the golden pen, the golden pen. The golden pen, touch my finger on the golden pen, then write my name up there. In terror, they will drink water grudgingly. Before the poem comes like a word from a brazen sky, the poet must lie on his side for a year, eating only dry bread and measured bowls of water. The poet must pour sand over grass and build the walls of his city. The poet must surround the walls with the offense of guns, and for days upon days starve the city of all its music. The poet's tongue will grow heavy, and his limbs will be bound with cords so he cannot move. He will quarrel with God about the meaning of poetry. The poet will beg for mercy, lying on his other side for 190 days, his body scarred with the wounds he inflicts on his family. All this a poet does before a poem, so that when he walks out in midwinter, his face will be smooth, his eyes will leave the quiet resignation we call peace, and his satchel will be full of whimsical lyrics about the color green and the sounds a woman makes in her dreams. I like to end with a poem. This is a poem from my wife, Lorna. We've been married for many years, since we met in 1980. And have been attached to each other since then, so that's a long time. This is a poem for her. It's called In This Saying, and I'll end with this poem. 1. There is a way to end books. The gathered papers, their weighty gift, the clean parade of words in columns of paragraphs and in columns of images, the tidiness of things. And numbered, they form the thing you have labored over for years. To end a book, you tie a blue ribbon around the heft, make a bow, kiss it. 2. The way to end the year of cataclysm is to find a piece of land by water where old boats rot at the edges, and the place smells of ancient things, sulfur, salt, rotting fish, and the deep musk of mud and grass. To then sit on a moving jetty, rocking against the universe's pulse, and there wait for the moon. 3. To end this way alone is to end with the hollow melancholy of loss and regret. Better to end with the voice of your woman, for you will need that voice, ordinary as rain talking your name. Perhaps it is the intrusion of her scent filling the air, or the cool of her touch, slick with tomato pulp and herbs. 4. I know the gender of this poem. Do not worry. It is because I know the name of the bodies standing in the dusk by water. Kwame and Lorna. They will hold hands, and in this saying, the poem ends. Thank you. I'm good. Thank you. I'll be happy to do questions.
Thank you so much for coming. If you haven't already, grab a book up there. Kwame would be happy to sign it. Maybe circle back or stick around for our informal craft talk and conversation with Kwame at 1:15. And we'll see you in the spring. Verse Like Water is going to bring us Forrest Gander, Gregory Orr, and the great Kevin Young next April. Thank you so much for coming. Stay warm. There's a pile up there, and I'll go grab them.